Returning to our discussion of conditionals, we've talked a lot about evaluating comparisons and determining true and false values. Now it's time to see where we can really use them. So we've talked about how programs are sequential. They go step by step by step. That's one of the fundamental aspects of an imperative or a command-based programming language, where you enter commands or instructions that get executed in a certain order. Another paradigm, another fundamental feature we talk about is branching, specifically conditional branching. And branching is a way where a section of code will sometimes execute and sometimes not execute. Here's what I mean. So for example, let's talk about somebody's age. We'll say int age equals 30. So this is a variable representing age, holds the number 30. This is a line of code that will always execute. We can even write some text here and just say your age is, and then the age. Okay, this is no different than what we've been seeing, and this code will always execute. But let's say we're interested in something like, can this person get a driver's license? So system.out.println and say you can get a driving license is how we'll phrase this one. So if I run this code, we see your age is 30, you can get a driving license. You can get a driving license. Now the problem is that what if their age was 12? I run the code. All right, we still get this, you can get a driving license. The problem is that that's not true. If you are 12 years old, nowhere in the United States, can you get a driving license? So we need a way to say, okay, sometimes we want to print that, sometimes we don't. And in Java and in a lot of programming languages, we achieve this through what's called an if. So an if is going to look like this. You have the word if, you have some parentheses, and then you have your curly braces. Inside your curly braces is the code that will execute conditionally. That means that will execute sometimes. So this is the code that we want to execute sometimes. So I'm going to delete it and put it inside the block. Now the parentheses, we have to put a condition here. And the condition can be anything we want it to be as long as it evaluates to true or false. And one such condition would be, what are we checking? So in this case, when do we want this text to print? In most states, the age to get a driver's license is 16. So we only want to print this text if age is greater than or equal to 16. Now, if we just did greater than 16, it would not print for a 16-year-old. That's why we're throwing in equal. But let's run this code. So if I run the code, run Java, I got the your age is 12. Okay, that happened here. But I don't get this line. Because when Java got to line 66, it said, okay, age greater than or equal to 16. Well, the age is 12. That is not greater than or equal to 16, so I'm going to keep going. Even if I go all the way up to 15, run. It printed age is 15, but it did not print this sentence. It's only when I meet the condition that I get that text. And if I wanted to, I could even have some text after that if. I can just say thank you, say that the program finishes running. So I'll save that and I'll run the code again. Notice I get the first line, I get your age is. I get the second line because I'm in the if statement, age is greater than or equal to 16, and I get the third statement, which came after the if. Now if I had dropped this back down to 12 and run it again, I get the first line and that third line because this is not inside the if, so it always runs. This is not inside the if, so it always runs. But this is inside the if, so it only runs if the condition is met. Now you can make this condition all kinds of things. You can change what this is. We can say you can not get a driving license. But if we do that, we have to change our condition to age is less than 16. Whatever we do for our condition here, this has to be true. So when we're writing our if statement, it's going to be if condition and then code between the curly braces. And we'll even put this out on a few lines so that it's a little more obvious. Code. Oops. Okay, so something like this. So this is our if statement. So remember, the code in here only executes if the condition is true. And we'll even make a note of that here as well. So the condition can be anything. It can be things that are sometimes true, sometimes false, but the code only runs if the code is true. So I'm going to change this back down here to what we had. I'm going to change age after the if, and I'm going to say age is 50. Okay. I'm going to move that down. I'm going to run the code again. Because this is where people will sometimes get confused on if statements. Your age is 12. Thank you. Now, some people will see this and say, hey, you made age 50. Why didn't it print the condition? That's because programs still execute in order. I changed age to 50 after the if statement. If I wanted the if statement to catch that, I would actually have to do another if statement after changing the age. So these if statements don't run forever. They only run one time. So it's not something that is constantly checking your values and your conditions. It only checks it when it gets to it in the code. In fact, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to debug this program so you can kind of see it go step by step. I'm going to debug. Okay, so I'm on this line. So Java says I'm going to run this line. I'm going to step over. Then Java says I'm going to run this line. Okay, then down here you see we get that text printed. So now Java is checking. Age greater than or equal to 16. It says, okay, age is 12. I'm going to keep going. So it skipped all of that straight down to here. And now notice it doesn't go back to the if because there is no if after I change it. And if I were to do this in this format with 17, I'll debug again. And you can watch the program execute. So int age equals 17. There's the printing line. Here we're checking the condition. Here we're printing the code inside the if. So notice the condition will always get checked. The program has to check the condition, but the code inside the block may not execute. And you can put multiple lines inside these blocks, as many as you need. And we'll say you still can. And we'll run it. Just like before, we got both lines printed out. If I change it to a number that's too low, you'll notice that none of it printed. So these if blocks are all or nothing. You might also notice that sometimes it is okay to not use the curly braces here. You can just do this. This is acceptable. Like, this code will run as long as there's only one line here, but it's very dangerous programming because it can introduce bugs very easily. Let's say that you start out by only putting one line there, and then later you need to add more lines and you forget to add the curly braces. You'll run into a problem where only some of your code is in the if block when really you wanted it all in there. It's just not good practice. So a good default is to always use the curly braces. A couple more things to notice before we wrap this up. Notice there's no semicolon in the condition, and there's no semicolon at the end of the block. Blocks of code like this, or like the main method here that have the curly braces, these guys do not have semicolons after them. Generally speaking, you're not going to put semicolons after curly braces. There are exceptions to that, but they are few and far between, especially when you're just starting out. All the statements inside the if, though, still need their their semicolons. The curly braces are there to denote a block of code. But you can use multiple ifs. You can even put ifs inside of other ifs. We can say, if age is greater than 19, we can add a line that says you are not a teenager anymore. Right. So if they're over 16, it'll print this. If they're 16 or older, if they're over 19, it'll print this. So if I run this, Java, we get the your age is 12 and thank you. If I made the age 16 and run it, I get the your age is 16, you can get a driving license and thank you. And if I were to make it 20, I can run it, and now I get all those. Oh, and notice I said print, not print ln, so let me run that again. There we go, that looks better. So you can get really complex with your ifs, so this is something good to play with. Whenever you're testing out your conditions, like we've said before, a good way to test your code is all of your edge cases. So here I've got age greater than or equal to 16. Good numbers to check here would be 15 and 16, maybe 17. We also have age is greater than 19. So good numbers to check here would be 19 and 20. So you've got to test 16, 15, 19, 20. Those four numbers would all give you good test cases. You can have more test cases, but that's probably a bare minimum you need. But yeah, this is the if statement. And so here is the kind of first look at what's called branching code, where your code still executes in the order that it's written, but now code will sometimes execute, sometimes not execute. And in this code, line 69, line 70, and line 80 definitely will all run. Line 72 has to run because we always have to check it on this outer conditional. Line 73 will run if the condition is true. Line 75 will get checked if line 72 was a true condition because we are inside the if block. And line 76 will only run if the age greater than or equal to 16, if the first condition is true, and then again if the second condition is true. Only if both conditions are met will that code print. So this is kind of your first look at the if block. Play around with it and see if you can get the behavior to match what you'd expect. And if it's not matching what you expect, see if your expectations are not quite in line with what they should be. But this is your first look at the condition, and then we'll play around with some more conditionals in the follow-up lessons.